Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the IHI Call 11 on two-stage calls, rules and procedures. My name is Nassima, and I'm going to be your moderator today. And before we start, if we move to the next slide, I would like to share some information with you. Firstly, we are recording this session, and we will be publishing it on the IHI website. We will also publish the presentation slides. The call has been launched, and all the links and details of how to apply has been published on the IHI website and the Funding and Tenders portal. Another important point: if you have any question, please use the chat function on the right corner of your screen, and we will get them at the end of the presentation. Today, we have two presenters. So we have Alessandro, who is call coordinator at IHI, and we also have Desmond, who is our legal officer. So now I will hand over to Alessandro.
Thank you very much, Nassima, for this. Thank you all for your participation today. This presentation is about both technical aspects related to the application itself, so what you need to do and take into consideration in order to successfully apply to your proposal through the Funding and Tender portal, and some, let's say, legal matters related to who is eligible, who is not eligible, intellectual property rights, and then some others related to the consortium agreement. And then we will finish with the presentation with some points to remember, which are useful for you all in order to prepare the application. But then, before going into the specificity of this Call 11, we would like to remind that so we are bound to the Horizon general rules, so Horizon Europe general rules, where there are single stage application and two-stage application. So the Call 11 that was recently launched, and then included in our amended work program for 2025, follow the procedure of two-stage evaluation calls. Given the specificity of joint undertaking and private-public partnership, there are also other specificities which pertain to the two-stage call. So in general terms, in Horizon two-stage call, meaning that you need to apply 2 times your application in 2 different timelines in order to have maybe your proposal as successful as possible. The first part is the stage 1, where we talk about Call 11 stage 1 right now. It's, let's say, a smaller part of the application because the information that you need to provide are rather limited compared to the full proposal. But then we would like to remind you that given the specificity of IHI and the public-private partnership, there is all the information that you need are mentioned in the call document. And then in this case, meaning that at stage 1, there is some pre-identified industry consortium members which are mentioned in the call document, which do not participate in stage 1, but then are included, and basically are those applicants who are taking part in the application only at a later stage. So stage 1, as they now pertain only to academia and other research organizations, but then we see the specificity of this a little bit later. So your idea as potential applicants is to bring new ideas in your application form that can be matched with the requirements which are mentioned in the call document and specified by the industry application. Also, you need to consider that although this is a small application, you need to put it in a way which could be, you say, appealing for the industry consortium member in order to bring a full consortium later on. And then you need to also take into consideration what are the general impact and expected outcome of each application under the IHI rules, which you should be having a transformative information for healthcare, and then meet some unmet public health user needs related to healthcare in general. So Call 11, it's divided in 5 different topics, and then what you see on the screen right now, it's a screenshot that I've taken from the Funding and Tender portal, which for you should be the first and the main landing page to have all the information that you need in order to prepare your application. And then the topics are very diverse in their nature. So they talk about, precision medicine for brain dysfunction, understanding how infection disease for non-communicable disease, AI-powered detection in pharmacovigilance, leverage Euro expertise to accelerate cell therapy for type 1 diabetes, and establish organ cardiology ambulatory surgical center in Europe. So you see that the subjects are very diverse, but then the application, let's say, procedure itself is equally the same for each of the 5 topics. We will have some differences in the eligibility criteria for some of these topics, but then we talk about this later on. So then in order to have more information about what you can do, what are not allowed to do in each of these 5 topics, as I said, first you go to the funding and tender portal, and then you can type easily IHI Call 11, and then you will be redirected to the open call for Call 11, and then you have in there all the instruction in order to prepare and submit the proposal. But then, in order you would like for you to have an extensive idea on expected impacts, outcome, the background that was the rationale that we use in order to prepare this application. So the wording, you need to go on the IHI website and then have a look at the call document. In there, you have a lot of specificity related to call 11. And then where these call documents are stored. So if you type IHI and then you go to the main web page, there is a folder, apply for funding, and then you will see in the center of the screen there is call documents. If you click on call documents, you have a look, and then you can see all the call documents that were prepared under IHI from call 1 until call 11 right now. And then any future call will have a specific call document which will be placed in the same page. So the page does not change. And then clicking on the call document, you have the specificity for each of the topic, which is determined in there. And also this information including the call document as well, but then we summarize this in a graph format. So as I said, in June, we launched the call 11, and then if you look at the call document webpage, there is already for each of the topic a pre-identified industry consortium member who take care of, according also in alignment with IHI rules, IHI staff, to prepare the call text per each of the topic. But then, and then these pre-identified industry consortium member are those that you will need to meet in due time to prepare the full proposal. But then at stage 1, the applicant consortium should be composed by academics, hospital, regulatory agency, patient organization, SMEs, or profit profit entities with a turnover less than 500 million. Then there is an application process until October. So you can prepare your application, and then we talk about this, the specificity of the template, which are the funding and then the portal until October. And then we run the evaluation. So the evaluation is run by external expert with the guide and lead of IHI, scientific officer, and myself as a call coordinator. And then after the evaluation, so the first rank proposal, so on top of the list per topic, will be invited to meet with the pre-identified industry consortium in order to, first of all, meet them to understand exactly what are their needs and specificity, and to prepare the full proposal. So this is the 2-stage that we are talking about. There is a short proposal prepared by a consortium which is not pre-identified in the call document, specific with academic, hospital, regulatory organizations, we said. Then there is the evaluation, and then the first rank on top for each topic will be matched with the pre-defined consortium. And then in there will be another round of evaluation. At the end of the second round of evaluation, what we call the grant agreement preparation can start, and the proposal which is winning will be transformed into a project. The grant agreement can be signed, which is the contract that the coordinator on behalf of all the members of the consortium can sign, and DC, so the granting authority, meaning IHI, and then the project can start. So what are the specificity of this, a little bit more in details, what is pre-identified, what is not pre-identified. So the pre-identified in a consortium is basically industry. And then there is a list. If you go into the call document, there is a full list of who are not, and then they are specified per topic, okay? And then they are responsible for the fortified in-kind contribution. So as in general terms, you might know, but then we go to this a little bit more in details later on, as 45% of the budgets which is available per proposal needs to be provided by the in-kind by industry members. And then this is another specificity of the public-private partnership and the specificity of EHI. So meaning that deep identified, so the industry consortium, which is mentioned in the call document, they provide 45% of the in-kind in terms of funds. They are the main driver of the topic definition. So basically they wrote in cooperation with the IHI staff. And so then this in kind can be done through expertise or asset or financial contribution. And they are listed in the topic text. And they're not eligible for funding at stage 1. but then they can contribute to being the part of the full consortium only at stage 2, and then for this they cannot be part of the application at stage 1. So this is very important. So what is not pre-identified is any other participant, as we have seen in the scheme before, that can apply during the stage 1. They are not involved in the topic definition because they need to provide their idea, which is breakthrough and transformative enough in order to be selected to match with the industry consortium and then go to stage 2. And they could join the consortium afterwards and then the gap. They are eligible for funding. And also, since you are preparing your application, this is a competitive call, you don't need to contact the identified industry consortium member in order to have some sort of leverage or more information needed for the application process, okay? Then I will hand it over to my colleague Desmond for the second part related to eligibility per the consortium, the participation, and for the funding. Desmond, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alessandro. Good morning, everybody. So as Alessandro said, my name is Desmond Barry. I'm one of the lawyers here at IHI. We're going to go through about 8 or 9, maybe 10 slides now and just cover some absolutely key aspects of eligibility, both as they apply to the general IHI rules. And we'll talk also about some of the specificities for Call 11. As some of you will already know, Call 11 has some unusual aspects in relation to eligibility for funding that we're going to cover in detail. Obviously, this recording is going to go up on the website later today or possibly tomorrow, but it'll be a useful record for you when we answer some of the questions that are going to come at the end. Now, in the actual slides that we deal with, we're going to deal with what we regard as the key aspects. But if you have any additional questions stemming from what we cover in the slides, just put them into the chat and we can cover them hopefully all in the Q&A at the end. I'm happy to say that I'm not answering the questions here on my own today. I'm assisted by Katerina, who's here in the comms room with me, and we have the rest of the IHI legal team online willing to prepare answers for your questions as well. So I'm confident that anything that is raised we can address this morning. Additionally, I would also direct you to some of the online resources that the IHI legal team has prepared. So we have the frequently asked questions document, which Carolina takes responsibility for and is at this point extremely comprehensive and covers many aspects of the actual program. And then we also have the guide for applicants, which is essential reading for anyone who's contemplating actually submitting a proposal for indeed Call 11 or any other call. We also have the contributing partners guide. And then if you're really ambitious, then there's the annotation model grant agreement. Which is quite a lengthy document, which basically takes the basic grant agreement that everyone would sign and then expands with a couple of hundred pages of useful, good practice notes and examples. Some of those things from the AGA we'll cover in the next few slides as well. When we do that part, we'll talk briefly about IP as well, which generally generates a few questions. And then there'll be some closeout points that myself and Alessandro will do. So let's get into eligibility first. Alessandro, do you want to go to the next slide? There we go. So when we talk about eligibility and the ability to take part in an IHI proposal and maybe a project if it's agreed to fund it, there are a couple of aspects there. So we talk about, as you can see here, that proposals in IHI calls, they're submitted by consortia. Those consortia that are considered eligible, then they're composed of what we call legal entities. Now, legal entity is a term which is brought from the Horizon Europe regulation. We'll talk about it in the next slide. So we're going to examine in the coming slides exactly what a legal entity is. We're going to show you how to ensure that the consortium that is going to prepare your proposal is eligible to take part in the actual action. And we're going to talk about 2 different aspects of eligibility, the eligibility to participate and the eligibility to receive funding. Next slide. So as I said, legal entity is it's not an elegant term, but it's one that that's in the actual legislation. So we said that a legal entity is any natural person or a legal person created and recognized as such under union, national, or international law. Now, this can essentially be a person or it can be a company. Usually in IHI projects, the vast majority of participants are usually companies or universities or research organizations. But it is possible to have an independent person who is a recognized legal entity as a participant as well. And as I said, the consortia that prepare the proposals that are submitted to IHI in answer to the various call topics, they need to be eligible as well. So first things first, to ensure that your consortium is eligible, then we need at least one independent legal entity established in an EU member state. I think that's self-explanatory. And then at least 2 other independent legal entities, each established in either a different EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. So I think that is 19 associated countries. We're going to talk about that a bit later on. But between the 27 member states and the 19 associated countries, I think then you have a very large pool from which to draw your minimum 3 legal entities. Now, what's important here, and which we emphasize repeatedly in the FAQs and elsewhere, is that when we talk about legal entities for the consortium, as you can see from the bullet points, they have to be independent legal entities. So what that means is it's not possible, for an example, for a company and 2 of that company's subsidiaries, which would give you 3 entities, to basically constitute a consortium on their own, because even if they were from different countries, because those legal entities wouldn't be considered independent of each other. So this is something that we deal with in the various online resources, but if you have questions, please feel free to submit one to the legal team. Next slide, please. So then we talked about the 2 aspects of eligibility. So the first one is easy, which is the eligibility to participate. And what that means is getting involved in the actual proposal and in the project. And the key note for eligibility to participate is that, subject to a couple of restrictions, which we'll talk about in a later slide, regardless of where you're coming from, you're eligible to participate in IHI actions. So even if you're coming from countries which are normally referred to as third countries, the best examples that come to mind are, for example, the US, India, Australia, who are not actually associated with the Horizon Europe IHI, you're still very, very welcome to participate. And indeed, we do get a very high number of participants from those countries who basically usually participate at their own costs, and they're extremely welcome. They bring valuable expertise and resources to the proposals and the ultimate projects that they join. Eligibility to funding is slightly more nuanced. And as you can see here, we say in general, and there's a reason for the in general that we'll talk about, but in general, legal entities are entitled to receive funding from IHI if they are either from a member state of the European Union, or are established in an associated country to Horizon Europe, or are established in a low to middle income country. Now, the low to middle income country is an extremely broad band of countries. And we'll come to a slide shortly that Katerina's prepared over the weekend, which will really illustrate this for you. So there's actually a very, very large pool of countries that in theory are eligible to receive funding. However, as Alessandro said, this is a 2-stage call. And because it's a 2-stage call, and because we have the interaction of this predefined industry consortium, there are certain entities that, even if they're from the countries that we've actually just mentioned, for example, from an EU member state, they're still not eligible to receive funding. So the first one we have on the list there is legal entities in a pre-identified industry consortium in the topic text. So Alessandro said, if you check the topic text, you will see the list of legal entities, normally companies, from the private members of IHI, who are, if they're in the topic text, they are not eligible to receive funding. Their job in the 2-stage call is to provide in kind and additional resources to the actual project. So they're not receiving funding, they're contributing. The other type of entity that doesn't receive funding is legal entities with an annual turnover of 500 million or more. So extremely large companies are not eligible to receive funding, but obviously SMEs and medium-sized enterprises are. We have a couple of asterisks down at the bottom. So the first one is, it links to the in general comment. As we say here, eligibility for funding is determined by the type of IHI JU call. Even more so call 11 that we'll talk about in a minute, but generally there are the set rules for eligibility for funding, but then these change depending upon the nature and construction of the actual call that we're talking about. So the call 11 specificities we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. And then we also basically say here the double asterisks in relation to, for 2024, Canada and United Kingdom are considered in general associated countries, but they're not for call 11 for reasons that we're going to talk about. So this is why we always refer to our participants to the topic text, which basically states usually exactly what the eligibility conditions are, the FAQs, and the additional resources that are on the website. Alessandro, next slide. I mentioned these briefly a couple of minutes ago. So third countries are not member states. They're not associated to the Horizon Europe program either. Legal entities from those third countries. And again, the examples that I used, they're pretty large. The US is treated as a third country because they haven't signed an association agreement with Europe. India is a third country. Australia is a third country, but New Zealand actually is associated. We'll come to that. So the best way to do this is basically just to familiarize yourself with the online resources, and you'll know which countries are and which countries aren't. And also the map that's upcoming as well has a good snapshot of who's associated, who's not, who's an LMIC, and it's very useful. And then lastly, while we're talking about the geography and the eligibility, there is an exception to the above, whereby legal entities from third countries and who are not normally eligible to receive funding could, in really exceptional circumstances, receive funding from IHI. And the logic here is that if there is a legal entity from one of these third countries who's really bringing something what we call essential to the actual project, the legal basis, the Horizon Europe Regulation, Article 23.2b, does provide for an exceptional mechanism where those legal entities from those third countries who are bringing something essential could actually receive funding. Now, this is at the discretion of the Programme Office as informed by a decision of the independent experts. So if a proposal goes to an evaluation stage and the independent experts look at it, and if they say, look, for example, this legal entity who's coming from Australia are really bringing something essential to the project, and the project may not be viable without their contribution, then IHI does have the discretion then to fund those entities. It's rare, but it does happen, and sometimes it's actually very useful. So that's something to keep in mind. Next slide. So a couple of bullets here just for attention. This isn't usually an issue so much for IHI projects, but we always flag it nonetheless. As I've said 3 slides ago, everybody, regardless of where you're coming from, is welcome to participate in IHI projects, and of those, some of those can receive funding. There's a couple of exceptions. So due to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, the decision has been made at the level of the European Commission that legal entities established in Russia, Belarus, or in the non-government controlled territories of the Ukraine, so that's normally the east, right, that section of the east, are not eligible to participate in any capacity. So they can't participate and they can't receive funding. And it doesn't matter what class of participation they want to take, whether they want to be beneficiaries, affiliated entities, associated partners, etc. They may not participate, and that's end of discussion. The legal team, we have had questions directed to us for borderline cases where it's not exactly clear where the legal entity is in the Ukraine and therefore whether they can participate or not. And we've done a quick check, we've done some analysis, and we've prepared legal feedback. So if you're not sure, I mean, we will refer to a map, but you can submit the question and then we might do a bit of additional legal research, but we can provide an answer in that regard. In a similar but not identical situation, the Commission has put measures in place to deal with the ongoing frictions with Hungary. And basically, as you can see from the main bullet point, no European funds, that includes IHI funds, are to be made available directly or indirectly to third parties that are public interest trusts established in Hungary, particularly in relation to the purchase of goods, work, services, subcontracting, or financial support to third parties. So the idea here is that IHI funding won't be directed to those entities. Next slide. So now we got 3 detailed slides just on the eligibility, and we're going to go into these in a bit of detail. This slide looks quite busy, and apologies for that, but it's a reflection of the legal basis that we're dealing with in Call 11. But we're talking really about 4 countries here, and they're on the left-hand side. So as you can see, we're talking about the UK, we're talking about Canada, we're talking about Switzerland, we're talking about South Korea. Now, the reason why we divided it into two rows is that the UK and Canada signed their association agreements, and these association agreements have what's called retroactive effect. So for the purposes of IHI and Horizon Europe, UK and Canada are treated as being associated since the 1st of January 2024, which is fine. And then the natural assumption would be, well, if they're there since the 1st of January 2024 and we're launching Call 11 in 2025, legal entities from the UK and Canada should be eligible to receive funding, right? But as we explain in this slide, because IHI Call 11 is actually funded from budget, a carryover budget from before this date, it essentially means that UK and Canada legal entities are not necessarily automatically eligible to receive funding. And as we'll see in a slide which is coming up, it's clear the way that the funding is actually broken down per topic. Indeed, UK will only be eligible to receive funding in one topic, which is the first topic, which is precision medicine. And in topics 2 to 5, they are not eligible to receive funding. And as we were illustrating there, basically, if you can't receive funding, then you can't be a beneficiary in there. You can't take the role of coordinator in the project either. So this is something to consider if you're putting together an applicant consortium. Which topic is it? Are the UK entities and the Canadian entities eligible to receive funding? If they are, then do they want to be a coordinator? These are decisions that have to be made by the consortium. If you have questions on this, please, as we said, consult the online resources. If it's still not clear, contact the legal team. And myself or Carolina or Chiara or Katerina or Raffaella will be happy to prepare a detailed answer for you based on the legal basis and based on the established methodology. The second row we have here, which is Switzerland and South Korea, they're actually what's currently in 2025 are in what's called transition arrangements. Now, what that basically means is that they're expected to fully ratify their agreements later this year, and it's expected that these agreements will be backdated to the 1st of January 2025. Even more so than the United Kingdom and Canada, they won't be able to draw funds. They won't be eligible for funding from IHI for any of the topics that we're talking about today in Call 11. But there were, in a moment, 2 slides away, we'll talk about some mitigating measures that we may be able to work on here. Next slide, please, Alessandro. So this is a map that Katerina prepared for this specific rules and procedures webinar. So as we can see, it basically breaks down the countries into various categories depending upon their relationship to Horizon Europe. So the easy ones obviously are blue, which are the EU member states. So as I said a few minutes ago, if you're a member state and you fit the other requirements in relation to your size and you're not in the pre-identified industry consortium, if you're a legal entity from one of the member states, you are eligible to receive funding from IHI. This is clear. As long as you're not really big or you're not in the topic text, you should be fine. The yellow without the diagonal lines, if you're yellow, then these are the countries that are associated to IHI and that they should, in principle, legal entities from there should be eligible to receive funding as well. So as I said, Ukraine, Turkey, the Balkans, New Zealand. These are all good examples of countries that have been associated to the Horizon Europe program for some time. And because their countries were associated in the period that we're drawing the funding from for Call 11, there shouldn't be any difficulty in relation to funding legal entities from those countries. If in doubt, again, contact the online resources, contact the legal team. The diagonal lines highlight the countries I've just been talking about. So Canada and UK, their eligibility is problematic because apart from various topics that I talked about, particularly topic 1, where they are able to receive funding, these countries aren't generally able to receive funding in Call 11. And then green, which you can see a lot of, these are what's called low to middle income countries. Now, a low to middle income country is technically a third country in that there is no association agreement with Horizon Europe or IHI, but these low middle income countries are still eligible to receive funding. So if you are a legal entity coming from, for example, Argentina or Algeria or Kazakhstan, you are eligible to receive funding from IHI. So this map is a really, really good, helpful snapshot of the various eligibility categories, and it's a good starting place if you're thinking about bringing in multiple consortium members from different countries and trying to figure out exactly what their rights will be in terms of eligibility. Next slide. So I said that there were some specific things to discuss. So this is kind of a helpful slide we've put together to make it slightly more accessible in terms of who's eligible, who's not, and what they can do about it. So as we said, we have along the top, we've got the country, and then the left-hand side, we've got the 4 countries themselves, UK, Canada, Switzerland, South Korea. Then we've broken it down by topic. So as you can see, legal entities from the UK and Canada are eligible to receive funding. So that's fine. So if you're going for precision medicine and you're a legal entity from UK or Canada, you can receive funding. However, the other 4 topics, topics 2 to 5 in Call 11, United Kingdom and Canadian legal entities cannot receive funding. Switzerland and South Korea, as I said, unfortunately, are not eligible to receive funding in this call, regardless of the topic. But as we say here underneath then in bold, there are methods for alternative funding, and some of them are very well known and very, very established. So as we say here, legal entities from the UK, Canada, Switzerland, and South Korea may be able to receive funding from their own governments, and we encourage them to contact their national contact point or relevant representative. So a good example of this is actually Switzerland, which prior to Switzerland's association, what would happen is legal entities from Switzerland would contact SERI, who is the Swiss organization, basically tell them that they're participating in an IHI project, that they're not eligible to receive funding because the Horizon Europe agreement hadn't been signed. And then the Swiss government would fund those Swiss entities. And as we understand it, our anecdotal evidence is that the system is well developed, responsive, and very effective. So if you're a legal entity from Switzerland, don't despair. I would urge you to reach out to SERI, and the informal contacts that myself and Carolina have had with the Swiss team, they're very good, and we're not aware of any problems in that regard. But we underline it in red here just to make sure. If you're not eligible to receive funding, we encourage you to talk to your governments via the NCPs, but IHI, we cannot take any role or responsibility in the application for or the granting of these additional funds. So this is purely a matter for the legal entity and their respective governments. We do have a specific request from the UK. So we have informal contacts again with the UKRI, which is the research institute, which is funding UK applicants. And we have a specific request from their national contact point to ask if you are a legal entity coming from the UK. This would be more for topics 2 to 5, but I think even if you're in topic 1, this would be useful. Please contact Ms. Jo Frost, who is the UK NCP, as soon as possible. Register for updates for advice and assistance regarding the legal entities from the UK's participation in IHI Call 11. And the UKRI are very good in educating their legal entities and assisting the transition between the various eligibility criteria and engaging them in IHI projects. So Joe should be your absolute first point of contact at the end of this webinar if you're actually coming from the UK. Next slide. So as promised, we're going to very quickly go through a couple of slides on IP. The IP rules in the Horizon Europe Grant Agreement are detailed, but they're detailed because they're responsive and they are very fit for purpose. We're not going to go through all the rules. I'm going to highlight in 2 slides here just some things that a general participant who's getting involved in an IHI project or contemplating doing so needs to think about. But then obviously if your proposal is selected for funding, then during the negotiation phase, that's when we really need to get into detail. But if Alessandro goes to the next slide, we'll just cover some very, very broad strokes. So this is a snapshot of the key IP concepts for IHI JU actions, right? So think of it as a workflow. On the left-hand side, you have the background. Now, the idea of the background is most, if not all, of the participants in an IHI project contribute background. And background we're defining underneath in the box in blue as any data, know-how, or information, whatever its form or nature, tangible or intangible, including any rights such as IPR, that is A, held by the beneficiaries before they acceded, before they joined the agreement, and B, needed to implement the action or exploit the results. Now, how this will work is, if your proposal is selected for funding, then there will be a consortium agreement drafted as well to sit beside the grant agreement. Now, the consortium agreement we'll talk about in a little while. But the key point is that in that consortium agreement, which is signed by everyone in the project, IHI doesn't sign it because it's an agreement between the participants, between the consortium members. It's usually Annex 4, sometimes it's Annex 3, depending on what the project's doing. There is a dedicated annex to the background, and the dedicated annex basically lists what background, what data, what information, whatever, that every participant is bringing to the project. And it's agreed that this is, by the consortium, that this is needed, and it's identified in that annex. And then the consortium agreement and the grant agreement will have rules which basically determine how that is shared. Now, we get this question a lot, so I'll deal with this now. If you bring background to an IHI project, that background is subject to what we call access rights. Access rights basically means that you have to share it with the other beneficiaries so they can get their own work done in the project. And sometimes you share it with the other beneficiaries so they can do additional work on it. However, let me be completely clear. Bringing background to an IHI project does not allow everyone else in the project or anyone else to commercialize your background. So you don't have to worry about someone taking your background and running off and commercializing it without your consent. Now, you can do that if you wish. Agreements can be made, but that is beyond the scope of the IHI project and it's beyond the scope of the legal basis. And whatever project participants do between themselves, that's for them. What the IHI legal team, particularly Carolina and Chiara, who are very good at intellectual property, what we really care about is that the access rights are granted where they are needed so other participants in the project can get their work done. And there's a lot of information on this in the grant agreement in Article 16 and also in Annex 5. So we're not going to talk about those articles now. All I'm basically telling you is that background is something which is contributed. Everyone knows exactly what's agreed to contribute before the start of the project. It's in the consortium agreement, and then it's used to generate results, which is in the blue box to the right. So during the implementation of the action, as I said, you bring the background, you give access rights, you share it with the other participants. They use it to generate results. Results, as we explained further down, results are any tangible or intangible effect of the action, such as data, know-how, or information, whatever its form or nature. So whatever is generated in the project is basically a result within reason. You can think of it as outputs, and it can be publications, it can be data, it can be a tool, whatever the project is actually doing. Similar to background, access rights attach to the results you generate. So when you generate a result, the very first rule, which is incontrovertible, which is inalterable, is that whoever generates the result is the owner of the result. Now, what the owner does with the results afterwards is totally up to them again. We're not going to get too excited, subject to a couple of provisos, which we'll talk about in a second. But you'd have to grant access rights to those results that you generate so other people can get their stuff done in the project. And that's it. If you have that snapshot in terms of how the IPR actually works, I think you'll have a good overview, a good starting point in terms of what the background does, what the results are, and where the access rights attach to each one. And then we've got one more slide that Alessandra is going to activate now, just on some tweaks for the IP. So things to remember for the IP. The IHI IP rules are derived from a couple of sources. I mentioned these already. The Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement, Article 16. Then they're supplemented by specific rules in the Horizon Europe Model Grant Agreement, Annex 5. So Annex 5 is actually quite large, but for the lawyers on the call, if you go into Annex 5, there's a specific area in there for Horizon Europe actions, and within that area, there's a specific area for joint undertaking actions for Horizon Europe for IP. And then if you go into that area, there's even a more specific 2 paragraphs of certain IP rules that apply to IHI, and I think it's one other JU, I think it's EDCTP3 as well. So it's important, particularly if you're one of the lawyers on the call, that if you're getting involved in this and you're thinking about the IPR, you need to look at Annex 5 in detail. And sometimes we impose the call conditions also have some of the IPR in there as well, particularly when we talk about things like 3A. I said there was a couple of provisos in relation to once you generate results, you can do whatever you want with them. The most important one is that IHI Program Office maintains what's called a right to object to the transfer of ownership or the grant of exclusive licenses. Now, very quickly, what this means is if you generate a result and you, as the owning beneficiary, want to transfer that result outside of the EU to a third party, then you have to notify the IHI office, and then we will basically look at what's being transferred and why it's being transferred, and we will let you know whether we exercise the right to object or not. The vast majority of cases we grant a waiver because it's not something sensitive actually being transferred, but the IHI legal team, this is something we take very seriously, and we say to our science officers, and the science officers say to the consortia, this is something which we will check, and it's something that we're usually quite flexible on, but it's nevertheless has to be observed, and it's something that we guard quite closely. So this is something that we feel the need to flag it here. Again, more detail on this is found in the grant agreement itself. We also have the affordable access provisions, which we colloquially call 3A, which is that basically any product or services that come out of topics which involve clinical trials must basically have provisions to towards making that product or service downstream more affordable, more available, and more accessible. If this applies, it will be very clearly written in your topic text in one of the last sections of the topic text under the call conditions. We always have language in there which basically says 3A either does or does not apply to this topic. If it does apply to your topic, then this is something you need to pay particular attention to, even at the proposal stage, because we need evidence in the proposal stage, which is going to be scored by the independent experts, that you are paying attention and you know what 3A is and that you're planning for it. There's a lot of information on this in the guide for applicants, which is one of our online resources, and also the legal team. We're happy to field questions on this. ROL isn't really something, a problem, or an issue. It's more just a feature of Horizon Europe that we have now that we didn't have before. It basically means that at the end of the project, a results ownership list is produced, which basically shows exactly to everyone exactly which beneficiary or which participant generated which result and who owns it. So it's very, very useful for both the consortium to organize their IP going out of the project, and it's also very useful for the program office and the wider European institutions to see exactly what's being generated in the project. Last one. Because it's Horizon Europe, IHI, we have this emphasis on open science. So a couple of things here. We integrate the open science dissemination model. I'll just refer you to the Horizon Europe grant agreement for that. And lastly, this doesn't usually happen in IHI projects, but we mention it just in case. Unexploited project results can be matched. If you generate a result and you don't want it, you can basically use the Horizon Results platform to basically match that unneeded or unwanted result with interested parties who may want to take a look at it. So IHI, the work that we do is usually pretty important. So I've never actually seen this mechanism used, but nevertheless, it's there in case it is needed at some point in the future. And then we have it in red right at the bottom. When I talk about Article 16 and Article 5, Annex 5, I'm talking about the general rules. They are important, but they lack specificity because the idea is they're supposed to be for general application. But the specificities on IPR as to, if you have an access right, how do you exercise that right? How do you notify someone else that you need to exercise the right? This is all dealt with in the consortium agreement. So think of it as the grant agreement. Article 16 and Annex 5 talks about the high-level rules. The consortium agreement works out the day-to-day rules of how the consortium is going to work, including the IPR. And the only rule here is that there should be no conflict between the consortium agreement and the grant agreement. Alessandro, I think it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Desmond, for this. So until now, we spoke about some general concept about who is eligible, who is not eligible. In the second part of this presentation, we will talk about some more practical information. Once you access the participant portal, what you need to do in order to prepare and submit your application. So there is a part of this presentation related to the template you're going to find on the portal, and then the part is once your proposal is submitted, what we're going to do as IHI granting authority with this proposal. What is the procedure in order to evaluate all the proposal? So once you access you remember in the second slides that I show you, there is the link to the funding contender portal, and then you click on the link for each of the topics that you would like to submit and prepare your proposal. And then at the bottom of it, there is, I agree to start an application for this specific topic. And then you ended up in a secure environment on the funding contender portal where you can prepare your application. Each application under Horizon, and then IHI is not different to this. There is a part A and part B and annexes. So the part A is an administrative part of your application, and then it's as a design in a way, and then you see on the right side of the screen, it's a sort of modifiable PDF that you can directly type the information in it related to your application. So basically, you need to put some information about title, abstract, who are the participants, and then you need to add one by one the participants which are eligible for this application. You need to put the budget. That the stage one is not so extensive because it's one line, so you can put only one line related to the total budgets. And then basically this is the administrative part where all the information which is needed, and then it's part of your application as well. So be reminded that the application will not stop you if you have less than the eligible number of participants required for this call, which there is minimum 3, so 1 member states and 2 associate countries. If so 3 different independent legal entity. But then there will be a warning message that you don't meet the minimum required for this call, but then you can submit your application. So make sure that at least the eligibility criteria for the applicants that need to be there in terms of who are they and then in terms of number, it's met. Once you have finished filling in the part A, there will be the part B. The part B is the second part of your application and then needs to be done in full. You will see when you access the funding content portal in the secure environment on the left side, you will have a pane, preview pane, and then in there you have you can download all the templates which are pertinent to this code. So the part B and the related annexes. The part B is divided in 3 main chunks of information: access, impact, and implementation. And then for each of these, you have some instruction what you need to fill it in as type of information under each of these criteria. And keep in mind that, again, since we follow the Horizon Europe structure, all the type of project that are going to be financed under IHI, there are research innovation action, and then there's a limit page for stage 1, which is 20 pages. So at this stage, you should fit in all the information that you have in 20 pages. And then in case you exceed your 30 pages, you have also possibility to have a sort of print preview, but then you will see there will be access page. So all the things that you're going to put after the 20 page will be marked as blank, and then with the access page. So the experts that are going to assess the proposal are not able to see it. And then there is only, at this stage 1, there is only one other annex that you need to put and prepare, and then it's also available on the funding and tender portal. So basically you need to download it, fill it in, and upload it again. So you upload the part B, and then you upload the type of participant. So in there, you need to specify which type of participant. Name, legal name, if it's like an academia, it is a research organization, and then there are the sub criteria that you can use. So you will see is an Excel file that you need to complete, and there are a drop-down menu that you need to highlight in order to have subcategories for each of the participants that are going to be part of this application. So you see there is a red asterisk, so part B. So part A is automatically, I mean, you need to fill it in, but then it's automatically generated by the funding and the portal. By the way, for part B, a type of participant, you need to download template, fill it in, and re-upload again. And the red asterisk means that both are mandatory in order to submit your application. So you need to, this will be generated as PDF and then will be annexed to the proposal evaluation. And then some highlights. So there is only an indicative contribution because this is stage 1. So you will see when you prepare the part A, there will be overall budget, and there is basically one line. So most of the applicant, what they do, they put the total amount, which is indicated in the funding and the portal or in the call document. Also, there are 2 other type of information that are not needed, but then we put it here because they are somehow part of the template, but then you need to feed in because it's the plan for dissemination, interpretation, and communication activities, which is needed at stage 2, and the same for essential information for clinical studies. So it's pertinent only to stage 2. So once the deadline is over and then you submit your application, the IHI office do a sort of admissibility and eligibility check. So again, we check if the proposal that you submit is, for example, has the minimum required number of participants, and if the minimum is set, if there are the type of participant which is needed. So Desmond has extensively talked about UK participant eligible for funding, UK eligible not participant, UK participant not eligible for funding for some type of topic in there. So once we have done the first screening for the admissibility eligibility check, we allocate expert to proposal, and then normally there is a minimum required of 3 experts per proposal. This expert, they will do first an individual evaluation, so meaning that according to their task and then to their expertise, they individually assess the proposal based on what you have submitted. So the part A, the part B, and the type of participants. Then there will be one consensus report, which is written for each of the proposal that has been submitted, and then everything is done in a remote way. And then there is what we call the evaluation summary report, which is the format that is going to be sent to the applicants to explain them if they were successful. So they will go to stage 2, or they are put on the reserve list because some criteria are met, but they're not so high enough in order to pass to stage 2. And then at the end, our work is to do a sort of rank list. So all the proposals that has been submitted per particular topic, there will be a rank list from the first one with the grade, the top one, and then we see in the next slide which grades are we going to give until the last one. So our rank list is composed by proposal, the first one on top who goes to stage 2, the other normally they're put on the reserve list in case the submission of stage 2 may fail for the first one on top, and proposals which are rejected. Rejected, what does it mean? That's or the threshold that they have received in terms of score is below, or they are not either admissible or ineligible. But then we see in the upcoming slide what this is about. So, and then as I said, there is at least 3 applicants, sorry, 3 independent experts which are allocated to each of the proposal, and the structure that they are going to receive, these experts, is they evaluate the proposal as is submitted, so not as could be, you see. And then for this is very important that you assess, analyze, and depend all the information that you might be able to extract in the application form. Also, you have seen the main criteria, so excellence in interpretation, but then behind this, there are other sub-criteria that we will use in the evaluation form, and this is the threshold. So the individual threshold for each criteria is 3 out of 5, half mark are possible, but the total score needs to be 10 in order to be considered, in order for a proposal to be considered as above thresholds. Okay, and then the total is 15. So, for example, proposal who is going to reach 15 as a score is going to next phase unless there is another proposal with 15. So we need to differentiate which are the proposals are going to the second phase. And then so the score with the comments associated to each of the individual score are mentioned in what they call the evaluation summary report, which will be sent in due time to all applicants. And then this is important to remember that under excellence, you need to specify what are the objectives of your topic, of your application, which should be in line with the objective of the call and of the topic that you are preparing your application for. And then you need to describe, for example, how your methodology that you would like to develop is in line in order to reach the objectives which are mentioned again in the topic description. Also for the impact, you should have, so anything that is done here as an atomic application, as I said, should be some transformative research innovation projects that should lead to a practical application in the life of European citizen in terms of health, for example. And then for this should be measurable, because we need to know, so you need to tell us which of the expected impact, which is listed in the topic text and in the call document, you will be able to meet or overcome. And also the implementation part is the part related to how you're going to form the consortium, the various work packages, how the different parties are going to be interlinked with each other and so on. And also reflect how your applicant consortium, because you need to remember that it's the first stage. So you need to tell us which is your consortium, which is composed mainly the academia as organization, is going to meet the requirements and then fit with the industry pre-identified industry consortium members. And then I'm back to Desmond with the final part to grant agreement and consortium agreement.
Thanks, Alessandro. So as promised, a couple of quick slides, just to summarize a couple of legal points, and we'll start with the agreement. So I mentioned this towards the end of my first part. So as we said, from the legal perspective, there's 2 documents here that the consortium are going to have to deal with. And the first one is the grant agreement, which is the corporate model grant agreement. So IHI uses substantially the same grant agreement as the other agencies and the other areas of the European institutions that are using Horizon Europe. There's a couple of specificities which I referred to earlier in Annex 5 relating to the IP, but generally, if you're familiar with Horizon Europe from other programs, you'll find a lot very comfortable and familiar for an IHI project. Last bullet point there on the left-hand side of the grant agreement. As we said, the grant agreement, it's e-signed between the IHI and coordinator. So in terms of actually signing the grant agreement, the coordinator signs it and then the IHI office signs it, and that's it. But then the other beneficiaries in the project, not the participants, but the beneficiaries, will then basically sign what's called an accession form within 30 days from the final signatures of the consortium or the grant agreement. And then that basically means that they're ascending or they're joining the grant agreement as well. We flag this because it's important that everyone knows that if a beneficiary is supposed to join, if they're in the proposal and it goes right through to funding and the grant agreement is signed, they have this 30-day window to sign the grant agreement. If they do not sign the grant agreement within those 30 days, then they are not considered to be part of the actual project. And that then has direct implications then for project execution, for budget, etc. So this is something to keep in mind and to make sure that when the negotiation phase is finished and when everyone's getting ready to actually sign the grant agreement, that you're set up, that you're validated in the tool, that you have a leader, etc., appointed, and that you will be in a position to sign the grant agreement in 30 days. Now, this is normally not a problem because this is extensively discussed during the grant agreement negotiation phase by all the beneficiaries who are involved in the proposal. But it's something that nevertheless to bear in mind. And again, for the lawyers on the call, this is something I would particularly flag for you guys. In parallel to the grant agreement, and indeed having a slightly different emphasis, is the consortium agreement. Now, the consortium agreement governs the contractual obligations between all the participants on things like rights and obligations, governance, liability, IPR. So as I said in the previous slide, the grant agreement, think of the grant agreement as the unalterable high-level rules. And then the consortium agreement gives you more flexibility and allows more nuance and governs the day-to-day running of the consortium. So long as, and this is bullet point 3, the terms of the CA must comply with the GA. So there can't be any conflict or contradictions between the terms of the grant agreement and the terms of the consortium agreement. As you say there, the consortium agreement, it needs to be adapted to the specific needs of each project. It needs to be fully agreed for signature before the grant agreement will be signed. So to put simply, if your project is, if we agree to fund it and you go through the negotiation phase and you prepare all your documentation and everything is set up and the grant agreement is ready to be signed, if your consortium agreement similarly has not been progressing in parallel, and if your consortium agreement is not ready for signature by all of the project beneficiaries, then IHI office will not sign the grant agreement. It's something that we cannot do because we need to make sure that those entities that are taking part in the consortium members are aligned and agreed on how everything is going to work before we commit the millions and millions of euros of funding and before we bring in the industry contributions as well. So this is absolutely paramount, and it has to be understood that this is a heavy responsibility on the consortium to have this ready before, or at worst case at the same time as we're signing the grant agreement. Now, the good news is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel each and every time. There are a number of templates for the consortium agreement available, and indeed 99.9% of consortia just use one of these templates. So template consortium agreements have been prepared. The private members of IHI, so that's the 4 trade associations, FBA, Europa Bio, MedTech, COSIR, have prepared a template which covers all the aspects needed for an IHI project. That's available from their websites. There's also a couple of other templates in circulation, such as DESCA. So you have plenty of options there, and you have a couple of good consortium agreement template models. So we're confident that this aspect, once you're set up, actually preparing the consortium agreement itself isn't too challenging. But nevertheless, again, we talk about it in the guide for applicants. And if you have specific questions, the IHI legal team, we're always happy to get into detailed questions on the rules of the consortium agreement. We're not going to advise you on how to structure it in terms of who does what, but we will tell you about the various rules in relation to IPR and such. Next slide. Oh, okay. Then Alessandra's going to do timelines.
Yeah. So thank you very much. So this is one of the final part of the presentations where we are coming to an end. So we have described extensively what needs to be in the application, by which means you can prepare and submit your application, who is eligible, who is not eligible, what should be the contents of your proposal. But then in this slide, we would like to remind you by when you need to submit some information. So the call is open on the 17th of June, and the submission for the short proposal is on the 9th of October. After this, we will run, as I said, the scientific evaluation, and normally before the end of December, we should be able to inform the applicants, so everyone, successful and successful applicants, about the evaluation results. And most importantly, we'll inform the winning consortium, and then how they can meet through a sort of a brokerage event with the pre-identified industry consortium member. And then once this is done, there will be another deadline for submission of full proposal, which is at the end of April 2026. And then again, there will be a second round of evaluation. And hopefully by June 2026, we will send out the outcome evaluation results letter for those who have passed from stage 1 from stage 2. The only difference in here is the stage 1 is open to everyone, basically. So information is available on the funding and tender portal. The application for the second stage, for those who are going to pass from stage 1 to stage 2, will be sent through a dedicated link. So the submission environment will be equally similar to the stage 1, but then only a link, a specific link, will be sent only to those, in this case, 5 proposals, which 1 per topic, which are going to pass to stage 2. And then finally, some point to remember is, as we said, so research innovation action is the type of action that we use in IHI. You should have at least 3 independent legal entities in a different member states or associate countries, and at least 1 entity should be established in a member state. There is a page limit for the application, which is 20 pages for stage 1. And discussion and contacts with deeply identified consortium members is prohibited to the or procedure, and then only the first rank proposal per topic, so 1 per topic, so total 5, will be asked to meet with deeply defined in the consortium in order to prepare a full proposal in due time, so after the end of the first round of evaluation. So as I said, your primary source of information should be the funding and tender portal, because where all calls, IHI calls are there, also closed calls. So you can have also information about upcoming calls which are there. If you would like to have more information specifically about the call document or other kind of information, you can look at the IHI websites. So it's better if you have a look funding and tender portal first, and then the IHI website, and then ensure that all information that you need to put in there are explicitly mentioned. Also, this is most important because it can be one source of disqualification for you, as use the template which are provided on the portal. Do not use your own, because one of the admissibility criteria is that you use the template which are available on the portal that you need to download, fill in, and re-upload again. And also, if you have any information, you can contact IHI. There is a functional mailbox, applicant at IHI, that you can use, but do not ask information, especially to us, about the interpretation of the topic text. And again, do not get in contact with the industry members. And then here we are going to send you the slides of this meeting will be available on the IHI website, and then here there is several hyperlink of information and documents that you can have a look in order to get prepared for submitting and preparing your application. And then finally, yeah, as I said, this is the functional mailbox where you can send your request, and then we'll be delighted to answer as soon as possible. Most importantly, finally, as I said before, and then I would like to emphasize this, each of the proposals that has been submitted under Horizon and then specific under IHI is going to be assessed by a pool of experts. Normally, as a requirement, we need to renew the pool of experts that you use for each evaluation every time. So for information, at least 20% of the experts that you're going to use for each evaluation should be new or brand new, meaning that they've not been contracted in the past years in order to run evaluation under the IHI. These experts are taken from a database of experts. And then this is for us the primary source of information where we can have a look at experts. So it's important that if you yourself would like to take part in this journey as an evaluator, so not as submitter, in this you can register as an expert, or you might know colleagues or friends that would like to post their candidature in order to act as an expert evaluator for Horizon calls globally or for IHI. And then this is the way, again, your primary source of information is the funding tender portal. There is a web page which is working as an expert, and then you need to register. You need to submit your profile, and then we should be able to contact you to see if it will be available in the upcoming months or years in order to take part in IHI evaluation. And then this is bring to an end to the Q&A, and I think I give it back to the floor to Nassima then.
Thank you, Alessandro, and thank you, Desmond, for your presentation. So yeah, I think we can move on to the Q&A session. So I'll start with the first question that we get in the chat function. So did you say only one proposal for each topic is selected for stage 2?
Yeah, indeed. So the first one on the top of the ranking, we pass to stage 2. So in this case, will be 5 because we have 5 topics, 1 per each one.
Thank you. The second one is FPA has membership of 40 pharma companies, among others. Are these all by nature of membership of FPA included in the 17 pre-identified industry consortium?
Oh, actually, okay, that's an interesting question. Thank you for that, actually. No, I mean, you're absolutely right. FPA, for example, is one of the private members, and it's one of the large trade associations. So it has a lot of members, but each topic will have a different pre-identified industry consortium, which reflects A, the expertise of the companies in various areas, and B, those companies that have resources that they can dedicate to the actual eventual project, right? So no, we don't, there's no set list for a pre-identified industry consortium, which includes every single FPA company. The pre-identified industry consortium and the FPA and other private members in companies therein is a response to the type of topic and indeed the challenges raised in the topic directly.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is, it would be important to understand which members from FPA are part of the different calls, as there would be the opportunity to bring new private partners to the table.
Yeah, so as we just said, and I think Alessandro really mentioned this, in the topic text, for each topic, there is the pre-identified industry consortium, which has the industry guide, the industry companies there. So if you check the topic text, for example, from call 11, you'll see that there's a different pre-identified industry consortium for each. So you can use that as your guide stone in relation to which companies are in there and are in the pre-identified industry consortium.
Thank you. So we have a question regarding the IHIGU eligibility. Do the other 2 independent legal entities in the consortium have to be from 2 different EU countries each, or can they both be from the same EU country?
Yeah, so this is kind of a reflection of the fact that you want a reasonably broad economic scope in terms of where your participants are coming from. So the rule is basically, as we said, it's one independent legal entity, which is the member state which you're talking about, and then the other 2, they have to be each established in a different member state or different associated country. So that's basically the rule.
Thank you. So can alliance of different universities / hospitals be part of a consortium?
Sorry, Nassima, I'm not sure I got that word. Can
Alliance.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different issues here, right? We keep talking about, in terms of getting involved in the actual consortia, we talk about independent legal entities. Now, what we frequently see, just for an example, is I think particularly in France and Spain, where we basically have different legal entities, for example, one hospital and then another hospital, or one hospital and a regional authority who may have a collaboration agreement or be in an alliance, basically joining the consortium. But they would join the consortium in their capacity as independent legal entities. They wouldn't join as an alliance per se, unless it could be argued that that alliance is in itself an independent legal entity and has legal status. So my answer is yes, but not as an actual alliance itself, normally as the component entities joining in their capacity as independent legal entities.
Thank you. Then we have, are UN agencies eligible?
So to go back to the original point, UN, everybody is eligible. Legal entities are eligible to participate from anywhere. So yes, they are very much eligible to participate. Now, if it's a UN entity, we would have to basically look at exactly which kind of entity it actually was, because they may be or they may not be eligible for funding. As a rule, such entities are not eligible to receive funding, but it's always an edge case, and the legal team actually is usually doing analysis on one or another type of international organization or UN organization to see whether we can fund them. So if you have a particular request in this, I would say very welcome to participate, no problem. In relation to whether we can fund you, I would actually recommend submission of a question to the legal team. And then our two specialists on this, Rafaela and Ekaterina, can take a look at it and prepare an answer for you, depending upon which entity we're talking about.
Thank you, Desmond. How diverse should a consortium be regarding the participating countries?
So as long as you meet the minimum geographic requirements that we're talking about, generally you're eligible. Now, there are a couple of nuances here, and Alessandro can jump in because there are some practical implications as well. But you have to think about the topic text which you are responding to by preparing the proposal. That topic text will set challenges, and those challenges by definition require a fairly broad range of expertise. And it's very unusual to find all the expertise that you need in 2 or 3 countries. So by definition, IHI consortia, I think, are quite geographically diverse. You know, I mean, it depends on a case-by-case basis, depending upon the challenge that's being met. But then there's also considerations of, you know, you want to make sure that you have industry, you know, sufficiently integrated as well. That's more down to the pre-identified industry consortium. But so the short answer I can give you is that diversity normally happens due to the nature of the consortium itself and the work that they're doing. But absolute minimum rule is you follow what we talked about in the legal slides, and you basically have one from an EU member state and then 2 others from each from different EU member states or association countries, and that's your bare minimum right there.
The next one is, assuming a company brings background IP to a stage 1 proposal and the proposal does not get funded, who is able to access the proposal after/during the application period? Would it mean that the potential confidential IP is made public?
Thank you. That's a really good question. We like that one. The lawyers are smiling. You know, okay, very simply. Going back to what Alessandro said in relation to the proposal itself, which is the short proposal, is very short. It's 20 pages to cover everything. So if you're talking about IP being introduced, I think it would be in the form of one sentence. So it's unlikely that anything confidential or particularly sensitive can actually be revealed in the short proposal. So for me, I don't have particular concerns, but then the proposals themselves, we keep for a certain amount of time to generate data as to the types of entities that are actually, you know, applying for IHI calls. Some of this is shared with the wider European institutions. So the stuff isn't destroyed straight away, obviously, because we use it for program definition and metrics, etc. But I'm confident that within the context of the short proposal, there can't be anything too sensitive in there, because the amount of information that needs to be crammed into those 20 pages is pretty heavy. So you're not going to be talking about IP in any detail. But I think that's a really good question. So thank you for that.
Hey, Desmond. We move on to the next one. Do you have to write your stage 1 proposal thinking on how the project fits within the objectives and contribution of the specific pre-identified industry consortium?
That's actually a fun one. No, I think what we would say is that, as I mentioned in the previous answer, you're writing the proposal as a response to the challenges set in the topic text. So the topic text will talk about scope. The topic text will talk about expected impacts. And that's what the applicant consortium is answering. Now, obviously, that proposal also has to consider how the assets, expertise, in kind, financial contributions, know-how, how that is going to be used as well. But there's more detail for that in the second part, in the second part of the second stage. Now, the experts will look at certain aspects of this during the evaluation of the first stage proposals. So you can't ignore it. But again, because you only have 20 pages, I think it needs to be clear that you're thinking about it. And if indeed you can identify, even at the first stage, this is how we're going to use what's coming from the pre-identified industry consortium, but you're not going to have a huge amount of detail, then I think that would be useful as well. For this, it would be useful if you look at not the specific topic text, but you look at the work program for 2025, the amended work program, which contains the Call 11 topic text, because you'll see there a snapshot of the assessment criteria that the independent experts use, the 3 criteria that Alessandro was talking about, excellence, impact, quality of the implementation. And you'll see the various things that they look at and they score on, and that will give you useful information as well as to exactly what you want to put into your short proposal.
Thanks, Desmond. Now, regarding the 500 million turnover for eligibility, does this apply to universities and not-for-profit organizations too?
It says legal entities with a turnover. The general assumption is that we're talking here about industry, right? Because how should I put this? We're talking, the key word here is turnover. So even if you have a very large academic institution, there's a difference between turnover and, I guess, endowment, financial endowments, which can be extremely substantial, particularly in relation to US universities. So in my personal experience, I've never encountered an academic institution that would have an annual turnover of more than 500 million. But if in doubt, again, please don't hesitate to send the question in and we can take a look at it and advise you on that. But if I was going to answer this in one succinct sentence at the risk of overgeneralization, I would say that normally academic institutions, universities, they don't have an annual turnover of 500 million or more, so it's usually not an issue.
Thank you. Now, where an eligible entity wishes to procure UK data, will that be an eligible budget item?
So there's 2 or 3. That's quite a loaded question. There's 2 or 3 different issues here. If the UK, right, so let's assume then that the UK entity is in the project. So the UK entity, right, the UK entity firstly is in the project, but if the UK entity is in the project, then they're entitled to any background. They have access rights to any background or results that are allowed to them in the consortium agreement. And as I said, the consortium agreements can expand upon, but can't contradict what's in the grant agreement. The key issue here is it depends exactly what role in the grant agreement that UK entity will take. Now, that's about access rights, but the question also seems to be talking about in kind. But there's an important distinction here, which is if a UK entity would want to contribute in kind here, then they would either have to be part of the pre-identified industry consortium, or they'd have to be a contributing partner who really should really also be in the pre-identified industry consortium at this stage, but could potentially come along later. So if they met one of those criteria that they were allowed to contribute in kind, then okay, then that in kind would be classified as non-EU, because for the purposes, well, for topic 1 it would be EU, for topics 2 to 5 it would be non-EU. So it's quite a loaded question, which we can answer in short bullet points now, but really requires, if this is a concern, I would actually recommend you send this question into the legal team, because this will take half a page or 3/4 of a page to answer in sufficient detail. But I think the key point is it's important to remember that contributing in kind, as Alessandro said, for a 2-stage call, it is purely and solely within the remit of either industry or the contributing partners, most of whom are already gathered in the pre-identified industry consortium. So if you were an applicant consortium, member and you're applying for funding in the applicant consortium and you're putting in a proposal at the first stage, then you're not in a position to contribute in kind. You can still bring background, that's fine. And if you bring background, it's made available to everyone else in the project and access rights will result. And if you generate results in the project, access rights will apply there, but you're not contributing in kind or financial contributions. And I'd really refer the querist to the guide for applicants on this because the explanation there is quite good.
Thank you. Now we have a question regarding the fact of becoming an expert. Do the experts need to follow the same rules for eligibility?
No, the eligibility and admissibility rules pertain to the applicants, to the consortium who is going to apply for a specific topic. The experts are chosen on different grounds. So based on their expertise and knowledge that fits the best with the topic and the potential proposal that are going to assess. Normally what we do is once we contact all the experts and we try to assign them to specific proposal in order to assess, what we do, we check the conflict of interest, which was not mentioned in our slide, but then this is a sort of preliminary step that we need to do. So we check if the expert that is potentially assigned to a specific proposal to assess as a conflict of interest, meaning, for example, is being employed or is employed by one of the applicants that is mentioned in the consortium. So this is something that disqualifies the expert from the assessment of the proposal. But then again, the experts are chosen for their expertise, for their knowledge in the fields.
Thank you, Alessandro. Now, a generic question on the grant. What are the outcomes of this grant support? Patents, publication, clinical studies, etc.
Sorry, so I had myself on mute. So, I mean, gold star to the person who asked the question because they've actually used the right language, the right terminology right there. So the key word is outcome, because as I said on the IP slides, when you're in an IHI project and you're doing tasks, you're generating results. Now, those results can take the form of publications, can take the form of patents, can take the form of platforms, can take the forms of data. The type of results that are generated, really, it's derived from the challenges in the topic text, because the topic text will generally give indicators as to what kind of results are going to be generated in the project. And then with reference to the last IP slide, the bullet points, I said that at the end of the project, we produce what's called a list of results, or results ownership list. And basically what it shows is every single result that's been generated and who the generating beneficiary was, right? So that ROL, that results ownership list, can include patents, publications, data, platforms, anything. So the key point is, I think, to answer the question, the definition of results, as we showed on the very first IP slide where I had the workflow, is that results is pretty much any outcome of the project, tangible or intangible. So whatever the guys do in the project, they generate results, and then those results are then subject to the access rights. So I'd refer you to two places. One, to the slide we talked about right at the start with the workflow, which shows the project workflow. And then secondly, for the lawyers in the room, Article 16 of the grant agreement and Annex 5, the specific places on Horizon Europe and IHI. And then I think you'll get a good feel for what the outcomes and therefore what the results of the projects are.
Thank you, Desmond. The next one is, would it be possible to open the IHI platform for interaction with the consortium?
I think that's really for you, Nassima.
Yeah, indeed. This one is for me. So we, as you may know, we only do the brokerage platform for single stage calls. So this is a two-stage call. So we are not creating any networking platform, but we encourage you to go to our website. So there is a dedicated page on how to find partners, and there is a link there. I can ask my colleague to put you the link on the chat so you have it on hand. So then I'll move on to the next one. Considering the call on pharmacovigilance and AI, are national regulatory agencies able to receive funding if they participate, or must it be pro bono?
Actually, that's quite a good nuanced question. We like that. No, because as we said, if we go back to the eligibility slides that we covered, right, we basically said that if the National Regulatory Authority can be classified as an independent legal entity, and if it's from one of the EU countries or associated countries, keeping in mind the provisos in relation to the 4 countries that we talked about, UK, Canada, Switzerland, and South Korea, they should be eligible to both participate and receive funding. So if memory serves, we have had national authorities a few times, actually in IHI projects receiving funding. Normally, it's not a challenge. Again, if in doubt, there's 2 functional mailboxes you can use, Infodesk or applicants. Send the question through to the legal team, and Rafaela and Ekaterina will do an analysis for you and give you a solid answer as to whether it's viable or not.
Thank you. Now we have, is there a limit on how many partners can be in a consortium? What number of partners is usual or can be recommended?
No, we're not going to. We wouldn't recommend. As we said, we've said it now in the slides, and we've said it in the one of my earlier answers. Minimum is 3, subject to the geographic parameters already covered. After that, I think Alessandro would agree with me. Alessandro, not if you agree and shake your head violently if I say something stupid, but I think the idea is that the consortium should be fit and of sufficient size and breadth and expertise to address the challenge that's in the topic text. So working from personal experience, I've seen consortia with, I think, 5 participants, and I've seen consortia in IHI projects with 50 participants, and it just depends on the scope of the actual topic and then the nature of the consortium that is addressing it. It's very variable, but on the whole, IHI topics would usually, if you were looking for an average, maybe between 20 and 30 participants. What do you think, Alessandra?
But I think I would not give some prescription how many. You need to remember that in the assessments, as I said before, there are like 3 main criteria: excellency, but implementation. Under implementation, you need to show us that the structure of your consortium, and then also the work packages. So what you would like to do in your project is fit for the purpose. So in order to meet the expected outcome and impacts. Also, another thing is how each participant interlink with each other. So there is one subcriterion, which is the consortium as a whole bring together all the necessary expertise that you need to have in order to reach the expected impact and outcome. And then what is the individual role of each one? Does it fit or not? So in the time of there is no minimum. We cannot do like an average or the minimum required in terms of. It depends on how you structure a proposal, how you're going to match with the expected outcome, and then is it justified or not? Because this will be assessed by the external experts.
You both. Now we have, if a legal entity in the applicant consortium is a branch of a larger parent organization, does the 500 million annual turnover limit for funding eligibility will take into account the financial of the branch or the parent organization?
So this is why we keep, this is why I keep saying the word independent. So we look at the entity and whether it's a subsidiary or not. And if it's part of a larger group, then the turnover of the larger group is actually considered. So my colleague Carolina from the legal team has a particularly apt approach. You know, she talks about it in terms of a family. If you basically have sibling entities and you're all controlled by a parent company, for example, then clearly everyone there, the turnover is actually going to be total. So yes, if you were part of a larger family, to use Carolina's language, then the family's turnover will be combined towards the 500 million. So the idea, as I said, is that generally SMEs and generally mid-sized organizations have no problem meeting this threshold. They have no problem fitting in under the 500,000, but the large international companies do actually have a challenge here. But that's the logic of the construction of the 2-stage call. So the short answer is yes. The additional turnover is calculated.
Thank you, Desmond. So now we're going to take our last questions. is the involvement of industry crucial for the consortium? Can consortium be composed of hospitals and university/academic research only?
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of the two-stage call that we're talking about, right? Maybe to illustrate by way of contrast, in a single-stage IHI call, the applicant consortium has industry members as well integrated into the applicant consortium. So in a single-stage call, you have companies and you have large companies from the private members, like you have pharmaceutical companies, you have medtech companies, whatever, and they're all together in the applicant consortium and they're all preparing their proposal and they're all competing for funding, and most, a lot of them are receiving funding. But the two-stage call is different. The beauty of the two-stage call is that for the first stage, the applicant consortium is composed only of, let's call them traditional beneficiaries receiving funding. So academics, hospitals, universities, research organizations, they're SMEs. They're eligible to receive funding, and they make up the short proposal. And you make up the short proposal with the knowledge, if you look at the topic text, of the industry that's in the pre-identified industry consortium, that the winning applicant consortium, which again is composed of academics and research organizations and universities, will then merge with to form the final consortium that will then do the two-stage evaluation. So the short answer, I would say, is in the immediate term, you don't have to, you won't have any large companies from the private members in your consortium, but you have to bear in mind that they will be there if you win the competitive first round, because then you will merge with the pre-identified industry consortium. And this goes back to one of the really good questions from earlier on. You have to think about how your academic applicant consortium is going to work with the pre-identified industry consortium, in terms of if you make it through the competitive stage and you get to the second round, and then what the final full proposal, which is 50 pages, is going to look like, which integrates the industry contribution, and it integrates that with the academic applicant consortium that won the first round. So the answer kind of is immediately not so much, but in terms of a long-term view for a successful proposal, yes.
So thank you, Desmond. So we are now ending this webinar because it's time. I would say thank you to Alessandro and Desmond for the presentation and for answering the questions. Thank you to all of you for your interest, and I hope to see you this afternoon for the last webinar for Call 11. Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.